I never understood why my father trusted his friend more than he trusted anyone in the family. Maybe it was because Mr. Samir had known him since childhood, or maybe because he carried a calmness my father never had. But I always felt that Mr. Samir understood me more than my own father ever tried to. So when he called me one afternoon and asked if I could come to his house, I didn't think twice. My father was out of the city for work, and the house felt too quiet anyway. I told him I'd be there in an hour. His voice, as always, sounded gentle, almost relieved. When I reached his house, the gate was half open, as if he had been waiting. I stepped inside and found him standing near the entrance, smiling the soft smile he always gave me. There was something different about his expression that day, warmer, maybe or more thoughtful. He welcomed me in and asked how I'd been. I shrugged, saying the usual. Things at home were the same. My father hadn't called in days, and I was mostly keeping to myself. He listened as if every word mattered. The house felt unusually quiet, even for him. The curtains were half drawn, letting in muted, golden light. It created a strange kind of peace. He brought me tea without asking, the same way he always remembered how I liked it. As I held the warm cup, he sat across from me, studying me with a softness that made me look away for a moment. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just intense in a way I couldn't name. He asked about things no one else bothered to ask. How I was feeling, whether I was taking care of myself, what I planned to do with my life. And without meaning to, I started talking. I told him how lonely the house felt, how hard it was to speak to my father, how I always felt judged or misunderstood. I didn't even realize how much I had been holding inside until the words started spilling out. He didn't interrupt once. He just listened, nodding slowly, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. After a while, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "There's something I want to show you," he said quietly. His tone wasn't urgent or dramatic, just meaningful. He stood up and gestured for me to follow. I hesitated only a second before getting up. He led me down the hallway into a room I'd never been in before. The door opened with a soft click, and he stepped inside first. The air in the room felt different, warmer, filled with the faint scent of old books and something calming, like sandalwood. The space was simple but personal. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and small souvenirs from places he had traveled. Framed photographs sat on a wooden desk, most of them from years before I was even born. The light in the room was dim, making everything feel closer, softer, as he closed the door gently behind us. Not in a secretive way, but in a way that made the room feel separate from the rest of the world. He walked toward the desk, picked up a small framed picture, and handed it to me. It was him and my father, younger, smiling in a way I had never seen my father smile. He told me stories about the picture, about their friendship, about the years when they were inseparable. His voice carried nostalgia, but also something heavier, as if he missed more than just the past. When he looked at me again, his expression had changed just slightly. There was no smile now, only a quiet sincerity that made my heartbeat shift. He asked me if I ever felt misunderstood, if I ever felt invisible in my own home. I nodded without thinking. He stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The room felt suspended in time. He told me I was not alone, that he cared, that he saw me in ways he wished my father had learned to. His voice trembled just a little, barely noticeable, but enough for me to feel something stir inside me. I stood there, unsure of what to say, aware of my own breathing, aware of his gaze on me. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply real in a way I wasn't used to. The silence stretched, soft and heavy. I felt something shift between us, something I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore either. And as he stepped just a little closer, the door behind us fully closed with a faint sound that seemed to seal the moment. Everything after that was quiet, too quiet, and I wasn't sure if it was fear, realization, or something else entirely that made my heart beat the way it did. All I knew was that something had begun in that room, something neither of us had spoken out loud, but both of us felt. The air in the room felt heavier than before, as if the closed door had trapped all the unspoken things between us. I stood there, still holding the photograph he had handed me, but I wasn't looking at it anymore. My eyes kept drifting toward him, toward the way he stood with his hands folded loosely, trying to appear calm, though something in his posture betrayed a flicker of hesitation. He glanced at me the way someone looks when they're searching for permission without asking for it. He took a slow breath, the kind that seemed to gather courage. I didn't call you here just to talk about your father, he said. His voice was low, steady, but there was a quiet vulnerability underneath. I want to talk about you. My heartbeat stuttered at the way he said it. Carefully, gently, almost afraid of how I might respond that I didn't say anything. Maybe I couldn't. The room felt too intimate, too still. He stepped closer, leaving only a small distance between us. His eyes softened, and for the first time, I realized how long he had been holding something inside. Something that wasn't meant to be spoken aloud, yet somehow had grown too heavy to keep buried. You've changed, he said, his gaze tracing my face quietly. You've grown, you've endured so much, and nobody seems to notice. But I do. His words held a weight I didn't know how to carry. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not with that kind of sincerity. Not with that kind of emotion that I swallowed hard, feeling a strange warmth spread through my chest. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. It was the only question I could form that he exhaled slowly, his eyes briefly shifting to the floor before returning to mine. Because I've been fighting something for a long time, he admitted. Something I shouldn't feel. Not for my friend's son. The confession hung in the space between us, fragile and dangerous. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the world narrowing down to the inches of space separating us that I could have walked away. I could have opened the door, pretended I didn't hear him. But I didn't. Instead, I felt the truth settle inside me like a realization I had been avoiding. I had always felt drawn to him, his kindness, his warmth, the way he noticed things about me nobody else cared to see. I just never allowed myself to think too deeply about it. Not until now, he stepped even closer, slowly, as if testing the air around us. His voice softened to a near whisper. I don't want to cross a line. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially you. His hand lifted slightly, then fell back to his side, as if he was afraid to touch me, even accidentally that I didn't move back. I didn't know if it was courage or confusion, but I stayed where I was. The closeness felt like a truth we had both been circling around for too long. I'm not asking for anything, he continued, his voice trembling just a little. I just needed you to know that someone in this world sees you, truly sees you. The sincerity in his words made my chest tighten. I felt something inside me melting, unraveling, revealing parts of myself I had never allowed to surface in front of anyone. My voice finally found its way out. You're not the only one who's been feeling something. The moment I said it, his eyes widened ever so slightly. A quiet shock, a swallowed breath, a soft shift in the atmosphere. It was as if time paused to acknowledge the truth between us that he reached out slowly, not to touch me, but to hold my hand without closing the distance. His fingers hovered near mine, waiting. An invitation, not a demand. When our hands finally touched, the warmth of his skin felt like a confession all on its own that we didn't say much for a while. We just stood there, letting the silence speak, letting the weight of the moment settle around us. He squeezed my hand gently, his eyes searching mine with a mixture of fear and relief. I don't want to do anything that harms your heart, he said quietly. If this is wrong, tell me. His voice cracked in the softest way. It made everything inside me ache that I shook my head slowly, unable to pull away, but he was still the careful one. He let go first, not because he wanted to, but because he knew we were standing on a line we shouldn't cross, no matter how strong the pull felt. We can care for each other, he said, breathing shakily. But we have to be careful. Your father, he trusts me. I nodded, though my heart felt unsteady. Because even if we hadn't crossed any physical boundary, emotionally, we already had. He opened the door quietly, letting a soft breeze into the room, as if reminding us both of the world outside. But even as we stepped out, the silence between us held every truth we couldn't speak aloud. Something had changed. Something we could no longer pretend we didn't feel. The days after that afternoon felt different in a way I couldn't explain. Everything around me looked the same. The same rooms, the same routines, the same silences, but inside, something had shifted. I kept replaying every moment in that room, every word he said, every breath that felt heavier than the last. It wasn't the kind of memory that fades. It was the kind that stays in the chest, quietly pressing against you that I didn't hear from him for 2 days. Maybe he needed distance. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he was trying to remind both of us where the boundaries were. But the silence felt like its own kind of message, and I found myself waiting for something, anything, that would tell me he hadn't changed his mind about the truth we had quietly shared. When my father returned from his trip, he was in a good mood, which was unusual. He talked more than usual, asked questions he normally didn't ask. But even while he spoke, my attention drifted. Part of me felt guilty for that, for thinking about someone else in the presence of the man who had raised me, even if imperfectly. But I couldn't undo what had already happened inside me. A door had opened in my heart, and closing it felt impossible. The first time I saw Mr. Samir again after that day, it was unplanned. My father had taken me along to visit him, and I had no time to prepare myself. When we stepped inside his house, he appeared from the hallway, and the moment his eyes met mine, something inside me tightened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But I felt it, and I knew he felt it too if he masked it well, greeting my father warmly, asking about his trip, offering us tea. But his hands moved more carefully than usual, as if he was aware of every gesture, every glance, every breath. I stayed quiet, barely speaking, afraid that even my voice might reveal something. When our eyes met accidentally, even for a fraction of a second, it felt like the room grew smaller. After a while, my father stepped outside to take a phone call. The moment the door closed behind him, the silence between us returned, the same silence we had shared in the separate room. Heavy and meaningful, he didn't come closer. He didn't say anything he shouldn't. He simply breathed out softly, as if seeing me again had confirmed something he was trying to suppress. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly that I nodded, though nothing felt simple anymore. "Are you?" I asked back, his eyes softened with a tired kind of truth. "I'm trying to be," he said, "but it's harder than I thought." His voice carried no blame, no demand, just honesty. The kind of honesty that makes your chest feel too small. Before either of us could say anything else, my father walked back into the room, and everything returned to normal. Or at least, the version of normal that other people could see that a few days later, I got a message from him. It was simple. "Can we talk?" I hesitated for a long moment before replying. When I finally went to see him again, things felt calmer, but still charged with everything unsaid. He made tea, the same way he always did, and we sat across from each other in quiet understanding. "I think we should talk about what happened," he said gently. I braced myself, unsure if this conversation would end something or define it. He continued, "I care about you. More than I should. More than I plan to. But if I let myself act on those feelings, it would only hurt you in the long run." His words hurt, but they also made sense. Maybe too much sense that he reached out. Not to hold my hand this time, but just to rest his fingers lightly on the table near mine. A gesture that felt like both a comfort and a goodbye. "You deserve someone who can be fully yours," he said. "Not someone who has to hide. Not someone who has to feel guilty for wanting you." I looked at him, searching for anger or regret in his eyes, but there was none. Only care. Only the quiet ache of someone choosing the harder path because he believed it was right. "I don't want to lose what we have," I whispered. "You won't," he said softly. "But what we have, it has to be something we carry in our hearts, not something we act on." There was no dramatic ending, no sudden confession, no desperate attempt to hold on. Just two people sitting across from each other, knowing that love doesn't always need to become something physical to be real. Sometimes it lives quietly in the spaces between words. I left his house that evening. The air felt lighter. Not because anything had ended, but because everything had been understood. And as I walked down the street, I realized that some connections aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to shape you, teach you, and then stay with you in ways no one else will ever see that a quiet, Hidden story point one that would always belong only to the two of us.